There are two fundamental structures that Gurdjieff explicitly mentions and emphasises so much that they are absolutely obvious. There are others, of course, as well. But in answer to your question, let me just mention these two fundamental structures that we have fallen into and cannot escape from. And this, I emphasise that this is our problem. We can't get out of these structures because we don't have the energies to do so. Not as a result of any fault on our part. That is to say, it's not a machismo teaching. That it's not efforts on our part that will allow us to escape from these structures. It is energy. We've fallen to such a low energetic level that we are trapped in these structures. Now the two explicit ones, of course, Gurdjieff writes throughout his writings that man is a three-brained or three-centred being. So we are a three-centred being. Now what does this mean? Now in fact, when we examine it, we realise that Gurdjieff is emphasising this because at any one time, only one of these centres, only one of these brains, is actually in connection with the world, experiencing the world or perceiving the world. Only one of the three. So what this means is that any one time, only one of those centres is actually perceiving the world. And by the time we realise that we are perceiving the world with that one centre, there is a flow of energy in us which has already taken us to another centre. Another centre is now experiencing the world, perceiving the world. So, what are the consequences of this situation? It means that at any one time, only one centre is experiencing the world, in contact with the world, or can be in contact with the world if we make an effort. The consequences of this are, first of all, we cannot observe ourselves. And this Gurdjieff emphasised. I think it's New York, 1924, something like that. He says, self-observation is enough in the beginning. Do not try anything else. Do not try anything else. Self-observation is enough for several years. And why are we trying to observe ourselves? Gurdjieff is explicit. It's in the book Views from the Real World, published under his name, Gurdjieff. And what Gurdjieff says is, you must try and try and try to remember, to observe yourself, try and try and try to observe yourself to come to the realisation that you can't do it. So this is psychology. A failure in our psychology. We can't observe ourselves. An abnormality in our psychology. We can't observe ourselves, pointing back to a structural situation. We are three-centred or three-brained beings with the implications of this realisation. Now within this idea of self-observation, if you read the book In Search of the Miraculous by Ouspensky, within the context of self-observation, Gurdjieff gathered the group together in St. Petersburg. He said, what is the most important thing you have discovered from your efforts at self-observation? The group waffled on about various things, as we do in our groups. But Gurdjieff told them. He said to them, well, he didn't say this because it will make it too obvious, but he said, essentially, the most important thing that you have observed in your self-observation is that you do not remember yourself. Try to remember yourself whilst observing yourself. Well, he knew that they couldn't observe themselves, so of course they couldn't remember themselves. So Gurdjieff gave the task of self-remembering within the context of self-observation. Later on, 2 years later, it's reported, Ouspensky in fact writes this marvellous line in the book In Search of the Miraculous. He writes, attempts at self-remembering gave no results whatsoever except to show me that we do not do it. We do not do it. We can't do it. Gurdjieff said, good, what more do you want? A man who knows this already knows very much. But what does he know? He knows that he can't observe himself. And he knows that he can't remember himself. Why? Because he's trapped in this structure of having three centres. We should be distinct. There should be four entities, in a sense, in us. There should be three centres, and there should be us. Why are we not there? And Gurdjieff's point in doing this, he's pointing back to the structural situation, that we cannot maintain ourselves independently of the three centres, the flow of energies between the three centres going on endlessly. We can't maintain ourselves distinct from the three centres because we don't have the energies to do so. This is made explicit in Self-Remembering. Gurdjieff said to Ouspensky, read the book In Search of the Miraculous. He said, we come to the realization that we must remember ourselves, but we can remember ourselves only if we have in ourselves the energies for self-remembering. He didn't say, try and try and try and try, and try and try and try and try to remember yourself. He said, we can't remember ourselves because we don't have in us the energies for self-remembering. So it's a teaching that's not about self-remembering. It's not about self-observation. It's about the energies that we don't have that would allow us to do these things. So the first structure is we are three-brained or three-centered beings. Now I know Ouspensky says and writes explicitly in the book In Search of the Miraculous. He says there are not three centres in the ordinary man. Well, we just have to take care with this book. Gurdjieff everywhere writes man is a three-centred being, because this is the structure. He's pointing back to this structure that we are now trapped in. Now, if we take the second structure, this is not even mentioned ever in the Gurdjieff tradition. It's not mentioned by Ouspensky, it's not in Search of the Miraculous, it's not in anything about Gurdjieff, but Gurdjieff from the very start of his own book, The Tales of Beelzebub, to his grandson, writes that man has two consciousnesses having nothing in common. So this is a structure. We have two consciousnesses, that is two conscious minds, having, he says in the chapter on hypnosis, absolutely nothing in common. Two conscious minds having absolutely nothing in common. We are in fact living in the wrong one. We're living in a consciousness at a lower level, a false, fictitious and unreal consciousness, a false, fictitious and unreal conscious mind at a lower level, with a state of consciousness that is not a true state of consciousness. A state of consciousness that he referred to Ouspensky as waking sleep. Initially as sleep, but later as waking sleep. So we have two conscious minds having absolutely nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one, in a state of waking sleep, at two lower levels. So we're trapped in a structure, two conscious minds. Now, as I've said, absolutely no mention of this in the Gurdjieff tradition, coming from Ouspensky. But this is Gurdjieff's teaching, this is what Gurdjieff wrote. So, we don't have a true state of consciousness because we're living in a false, fictitious and unreal conscious mind. The other conscious mind in us, we have two conscious minds having nothing in common. The other conscious mind in us has a true state of consciousness, consciousness of self. And Gurdjieff is pointing out that we don't have consciousness of self. Why not? This is a psychological state, admittedly, I'll give you that. But Gurdjieff pointed out the psychology to show the structural situation. We have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one. So in answer to your question, Gurdjieff was teaching psychology only to point out the abnormalities in our psychology, pointing back to the fact that we are trapped in structural situations from which we cannot emerge. Why are we trapped in three centres, three brains? Because we don't have the energy to be ourselves, to maintain ourselves as distinct from the three centres. Why are we trapped in two conscious minds having nothing in common and we are living in the wrong one? Because we don't have the energies to maintain ourselves in our true conscious mind. So we have to live in a false, fictitious and unreal conscious mind at a lower level in a state of consciousness known as waking sleep. So Gurdjieff was not teaching psychology. If he taught psychology as it appears, as the Gurdjieff tradition suggests, it was for a reason. It was to point back to the fact that we are living in a structural situations, trapped in these situations, and they, being trapped in these structural situations, result in an abnormal psychology. In the case of three centres or three brains, we can't observe ourselves and we can't remember ourselves. In the case of two conscious minds having nothing in common, we are living in the wrong one. We don't have a true state of consciousness of self. But these are the consequences of the structural situations which Gurdjieff is explaining here. So in answer to your question, there's the first two structures that we are absolutely and totally trapped in. And of course we're trapped in them because we don't have energies. It's not a psychological situation, it's a structural situation, it's an energetic situation. Man the machine. A machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions, and it always has an operator. We're not learning here from Gurdjieff about the operator of the machine. We're learning about the machine, the structure, the energies of the machine, which lead in consequence to an abnormal psychology.